All right. So today we're here to have a chat with Kim. Kim reached out to me when I did a call out to lesbians to tell me their peak trans moments and how they relate to being, well, how they got to the point of being maybe critical of this, gender critical, I guess, or trans ideology critical.
Yeah.
So go ahead, quick introduction, and then we'll get into it.
I'm Kim. I have not identified as trans myself, but I am a butch lesbian. Um, through being involved in queer spaces and coming on this timeline of like thinking I was straight to thinking I was bi to thinking to realizing that I was a lesbian. Um, how that has affected my view of the trans community and my relation to it has it's been an interesting ride. And of course, as I was diagnosed with PCOS in middle school, I've always had this facial hair that I've gone through trials and tribulations of accepting. And it has launched me into the trans conversation without actually identifying it for myself.
And how old are you?
I am 29.
Okay. So when did you first hear about trans stuff? That you could transition, that people are trans.
Yeah, so I had been on Tumblr for a long time. That's a starting point in online culture for a lot of people my age. So I was on Tumblr maybe like 2012-ish, when I was in high school. And I had some like queer and trans friends at that point. The trans people that I knew when I was younger, in high school and college, they were your true, like, really suffered from like dysphoria, like true, there's definitely a difference, or there was a difference at that point in describing sex dysphoria, gender dysphoria, and, what people actually suffered from, and therefore the steps that they would take to feel better about that.
So you consider there's true trans?
I did at the time.
Okay.
I'm on the fence of, I recognize that people definitely suffer from, dysphoria or problems with their sex and physical appearance and all of that. As for the answer being medicalization and changing the body, maybe not. But again, as somebody that didn't suffer too harshly from that, other than just like how I appeared to the world, I don't have a great answer.
Well, I don't mean to stop your role, but I was just, this is something that's always a bee in my bonnet, right? Because I did suffer from sex dysphoria for a very long time. And I guess you could say even gender dysphoria. They used to draw the distinction between the two.
Right.
And so as far as clinically goes, I was diagnosed and met all the criteria. I should be the truest of the transsexuals,
Right.
But no, it actually didn't fix anything, because I am a woman, I am female, I am lesbian, and that's not gonna fix my issues. It masks the issues. It helps. I'm not gonna say it doesn't help, but it doesn't fix it or really heal. I would say heal from it.
Exactly.
And I do like to push back against the gender dysphoria thing, because when I run across other lesbians that don't experience any kind of body image issues or sex dysphoria or gender dysphoria, it's like there's this disconnect where they think that, oh, if you do, then you must be something other than just a normal woman who is suffering from these issues, right? So they make an exception.
Right.
And I don't want lesbians to make that exception anymore. I want lesbians to understand that being a lesbian woman, especially butch, is really hard. And a lot of us do develop a lot of self-hate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like kind of,
I know. And that's what I've like stepped away from very, very much. When I was, like I said, like my experience of transness when I was younger, first like hearing about this was, oh, that's something other than what I experienced. Like that's something that I couldn't possibly understand, therefore who am I to speak on how it's treated? And I'm realizing more and more that this is not too different from what I experience, and therefore, like, medicalization is
yeah.
not there are other ways
Well,
to
and
deal
also
with.
they like to put it in the special category, and it's not a
Yeah.
special category. It is just a emotional and mental health issue, like so many other issues. It's very just normal. It's just right there down there with all kinds of other disorders people have, right? It's
Yeah,
not special. And I think that's the biggest thing. If we take it out of the special box, I think people could be really helped.
for sure, for
But
sure.
anyway, sorry, that's my sidetrack on that.
No worries, no worries. Um, so yeah, I definitely was exposed to it, online spaces, Tumblr, and a little bit in real life, like I said, with these trans friends. But yeah, mostly online, I would say. And going through the years from like 2012 up until 2024 here, I've seen the conversation around trans change very, very much, as I'm sure you've seen yourself. Um, you know, in the early 2010s, I remember being very understanding of the way that it was described. There were a couple ways of describing it, like, oh, a man in a woman's body, a mismatch of brain and sex. There was still, I think, a distinction between sex and gender that I could
Mhm.
really get on board with. A lot of people who would identify as trans would be like, yes, like I have a female body, like I was born female, AFAB, but I identify as a man. I go through
Yeah,
the
I
world.
will agree. There was still a little bit more recognition of like the reality of the sex
Yeah,
of your
yeah.
sex. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And I could get that. Did I agree with it wholeheartedly? I don't know. I feel like I didn't think too hard about it because I didn't think that it affected me, but like I could get that.
Yeah.
Um, Eventually, I saw the pushback of that language. I saw the come and go of AFAB and AMAB. Like that became like, okay, let's make a distinction of what people are assigned. Great. Oh, you're not allowed to say that anymore. Oh, I thought that we came up with that. It just became, every time that I thought that I knew how to talk about it or had a way of understanding it, it changed, and I was like, oh, that was wrong. Okay, all right, what's the new thing? You know,
Yeah.
um, I always had a little bit of hesitancy of understanding trans women. I felt like I could relate on like a gender nonconforming level. I was like, I totally understand, not agreeing with the way that people see you, or, not understanding what your whole vibe is. Like, I really get it, and wanting to change the way that you present and the way that people understand you. Fine. You're pushing back against the expectation of what you're supposed to look like. I love that. Cool. Um, and then to say like, oh, I'm female, I'm like, no, 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 it's different. And I saw some lesbians online that were making pretty good sense of it. They're like, oh, well, if you're socialized male, and you can take on the role of being a woman, the more that you look feminine, the more that you pass, like, sure. And then it became wrong to say that trans women were socialized male. I was like, that one I can't wrap my head around. I'm like, then what is it? Then what is it? And it just became tougher and tougher to describe the feelings that I had of like who I related to, who I didn't relate to. I found community with a lot of trans men, people who describe themselves as trans masculine. And the more that I related to that, the more I saw conversations about people saying like, oh, trans, butch lesbians have more in common with trans women than they do trans men. And I'm like, on paper, we are the same thing, the same people who have chosen two different labels for themselves with the same experience. So how can that be true? It really got me hung up.
No, yeah, same. I mean, there's so much relation there, and I think, one of the I think, well, trans identified females who are lesbian or previously butch, I think we have that in common with. And still, even we have the most in common with, but then we also have more in common with even the straight ones than the dudes. It's just because we're all female, we're all women. Uh,
Right.
we all have the same experience, grown up with the same experience, have the same bodies, have the same struggles. Um, But yeah, just I saw so many. Well, me personally, I just saw so many Butch lesbians transition. So it's like, duh. Obviously, we're gonna feel a relation there.
Right, like, for a while, that was the same person,
Yeah.
a butch who chose to transition or, get a mastectomy or go on testosterone, like, they were, at one point, all called the same thing, just they just made a different decision about how to go about it. It doesn't make them, like you said, a magically different type of person.
Yeah.
It's not something
I would
special or
say
something.
that acceptance has been varied though, because like I know from listening to some of the older butches that transitioned, when they transitioned, say in the 80s,
Mhm.
well, if it was in the 70s, 80s, maybe even a little bit in the 90s, especially if they were in feminist lesbian spaces, they were not allowed in those spaces anymore. Absolutely not. Most of the time. As soon as they
Yeah,
looked male, they were like, get the fuck out. Then I think
yeah,
my generation kind of came along and was actually a little bit more like, whatever, you're still in the group, you know?
yeah,
And that just kind of, but I almost think that was a problem, right?
yeah.
Because because I think there's definitely a social contagion aspect to it, a big one. And so you get one in there and she tells the other one, "Oh, I feel these horrible ways and I took tea and now I feel better." And I mean, this happened to me and I'm sitting there listening going, "Checkbox, checkbox, checkbox. I should take tea too." So,
Yeah, yeah, and I really do wonder what, my trajectory might have been if I didn't already grow this facial hair myself on my own. I wonder the more that these are all hypothetical, like I had an in on this.
so how did you come to terms with yourself being a butch lesbian and not getting caught up in the trans stuff?
It's a good question. I thought that I was straight and played it feminine for most of middle school, high school. Not until like I said, I was diagnosed with PCOS in middle school, on the basis of I have my own beef with a PCOS diagnosis when the criteria for PCOS is basically four checkpoints: irregular periods, excess hair growth, body, facial hair, um, a blood test to show, a hormone imbalance of androgens, testosterone, and polycystic ovarian syndrome, cysts on your ovaries. I was diagnosed based on the first three: the facial hair, irregular periods, and the blood test. But never had an ultrasound until I asked for one later in life to show that I actually didn't have any irregular cysts on my ovaries. So to
So
call it that, yeah,
yeah, so the blood test is that just showing, what does that show, that you have higher testosterone than
right,
normal or what?
right.
How much higher? I don't know much about it.
Me, I was in middle school. This was all conversations with my parents. I don't know the exact levels to the
Okay.
degree that like so many trans men are able to talk about, like, oh, I'm on so many milligrams or
Oh no,
this. Like,
I can tell you right now, it's going to be way, way higher. There's no way. Um, I guess I have known women who've been recommended to take something to lower it because it's unhealthy to have higher doses. So I don't know
right.
like where that falls, and I think doctors are all kind of like in different ways about it.
And I was always very skeptical of this. Even in, well, middle school, I didn't really have too much of a part in these doctor visits. I felt like I was kind of just along for the ride, getting my blood test. Okay, cool. But as I thought about it more in high school and taking control of how I wanted to go about it, I was always weirded out by the fact that it didn't seem that, other than an irregular period, that there was too much wrong. It was like a little bit of stubble. When I was just going through puberty, I could really shave my chin, every couple of days and have it be non-noticeable. And I did that for years and years. It was very manageable, especially once I took care of the irregular periods. They gave me birth control. So that is, moderating the level of testosterone that I have. Their thought there was that, oh, once we get some estrogen into the system, maybe if you're on this for like, up to a year, maybe, and then we take you off, that like maybe we can like jumpstart your system into like figuring it out. These are all theories because nobody knows shit about PCOS, right?
Women's health in general is not the
Yeah,
greatest. Or,
yeah.
healthcare around women's issues is not the greatest.
Right. So looking back on this theory was so funny. Like you thought that you could just give me estrogen for a year, take me off, and then my body would figure out how to make it. Sure, we tried it. We went off the birth control, went right back to missing my period. Fine.
Yeah.
So we were then left with okay, there's no cure for PCOS. You can either take birth control for the rest of your life or
Using
go
birth
off it and have a
control.
weird period.
Yeah. And
Um,
really, is it inconveniencing you that much? Are you in a kind of medical danger, you know?
That was always my question. It
Yeah.
seemed like, you know, it seemed like the treatment was offered mostly because it would be horrible to be a woman with facial hair. It was
That's the
always
sense I've gotten as well, because like you, I did start to get pretty substantial facial hair in junior high, early junior high, so puberty, and noticeable to where I was getting made fun of for it, and I was horrified by it, and it also led to me to feeling like I wasn't really there's something wrong with me as a woman because I had extra hair.
of
Um,
course.
yeah, and actually, my pattern is before testosterone is very similar to yours. Like that's probably exactly what I would have had to if I had left it alone and not taken testosterone.
Oh, I know. You've said it before, like it's a female pattern of like
Absolutely.
facial hair growth. I see it on trans men all the time where it's just down here, it's a little bit here. I'm just starting to connect a little bit here, but not on this side.
Yeah. Well, what
It's
happens is
different.
we don't really get it on the cheeks.
Right.
Like that's a very male pattern to have it up on the cheeks. We get it like right down here.
It's just down here. It
Yeah.
is, yeah. If I let it go, it's a little neck beardy.
Yeah. Um, but that was my thing too. And but I had regular periods. I didn't have cysts. There was nothing. Like
Yeah.
I actually went to the doctor at 17 to get I had an ultrasound, I had the blood test, I had that, and they basically were just like, well, we could give you something to try to get rid of your facial hair. And I'm like,
Mhm.
no, I'm not taking meds for that. But
Yeah.
it's
So I mean, I guess the only threshold that I crossed there was that it was affecting my periods, I guess.
Mhm.
Um, which I didn't even ask about really until so I continued to take birth control through high school. I was like, the irregular periods meant that I was just like kind of spotting almost all the time. It was just
Ugh, that's annoying.
right. It's very tough to manage. So like I
Yeah.
was on it to like regulate that. It extremely regular, totally fine. Also going through high school, it definitely did thin out the hair or at least stop the growth a little bit that if I wasn't on it, I would have to shave every day to pretend like I didn't grow anything. And even then you get razor bumps, there's a little bit of stubble, it gets kind of
Yeah.
gray. Like there's no pretending that it's not there.
The 5 o'clock shadow.
Yeah, exactly. There's no pretending that it's not there, that it doesn't happen at all. So birth control definitely slowed it down, made it a little thinner. It was very manageable through high school. And I had my regular period. Everything was great. I also, like I said, I played it straight as at the time, and I had a boyfriend at the end of high school that I dated through the very beginning of college. So birth control was helpful also.
Oh, I'm curious, how
um,
did you manage that having a boyfriend thing?
oh man, I played it pretty cool. I always have a hard time like revisiting this trajectory of like very genuinely thinking that I was straight. I
You were
always
straight?
had what's that?
What made you think you were straight?
I didn't see lesbianism as an option. I saw lesbians out there. I saw gay people and was like, great for them. That's not me. I didn't have exactly the same, you know, your typical butch childhood of like, really hardcore tomboy, really didn't fit in with the girls or really, I always had a little bit of a not like other girls complex. I look back at it now, and I had a little bit of a sexist among all of us, right? I had a pretty sexist uh, look at other girls. Like I really thought that like can't explain it. Women aren't as funny as men. Like I just really thought that
Or silly?
those,
We
yeah,
Yeah.
those rules were in place, and I didn't see them as genuinely as I saw men, but I also didn't see myself as like one of the guys either. I knew that I was like one of the girls, but I was different in some way.
Yeah.
So I was fat and hairy. I didn't think that I was particularly sexy. I didn't think that I really had an avenue for that. I thought I could really get by. I dated this guy. He was kind of a nerdy guy. We were both really smart and we got along. And it just became very, very obvious that I was not in it all the way. I told you I had some gay and trans friends at the time. I would go to their like house parties and stuff, and I would bring my boyfriend. And eventually, I identified as bi because I realized every time that I went to these parties, and all of these girls would be like, "Kim, you're so pretty, you're so cool." Like, oh my god, I'd be like, "Oh, thank you guys, thank you so much." And I would go home with my boyfriend, and he'd be like, "Whenever I say you're pretty, you say ew." He's like, I just can't help but notice the different reaction that you have. And I was like, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And it went on for a little too long.
Yeah.
um, I had that trajectory of thinking I was straight.
And you guys had sex?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
well, okay. I'm just curious. I might take this out, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, sure.
I can take anything out you don't like.
I'm happy to talk about it also. It's go ahead.
Just because there's been online fights about this kind of stuff. So that's why I just like to talk about it. How was the sex? How did you manage the sex? What did you feel about the sex?
It's weird to think about how I didn't have too much of a problem with it. And I think that that's just like teenage hormones of like, it was being straight felt like I had a script to follow, right? Mm-hmm. Like it made sense that like, even though I didn't feel particularly sexy, that I was a woman and that I could, I could orgasm. I could get off from this. Like it didn't seem too complicated to me. The longer, like once we had dated for like longer than a year, it started to feel like I didn't want to be like the girlfriend to a boyfriend. And that's like a relationship thing that like kind of stuck with me through further exploration of my sexuality, where it's like something about this dynamic and what we have going on. Like, I don't respect men. I don't.
Yeah. Were you sexually attracted to him?
I thought I was. One of my favorite memories from dating this guy was at the time I had a bit of a fantasy of men wearing women's lingerie, and he heard about, like I had mentioned this to him once before. I was like, but you totally don't have to do it. Like you don't, like it's just up here. Like don't worry about it. And one day he did like buy panties and stockings and whatever, and I was like, oh. And we had sex and he was like, oh, you're like a little bit more dominant than usual. And I was like, yeah, this is something we need to talk about this. Like it was, I was always looking for something feminine there, I feel like. But yeah, like I said, the longer that we were together, the more I realized that like, the more I think about this, the more I think about my role in this, I was like, I was doing this just to like have a boyfriend or just to have sex. And I wasn't totally messed up about it, but it wasn't what I wanted.
Interesting. See, like my experience, because I also have had sex with men way back in the day.
Yeah.
My sense was was I dated a guy for a while. He was very nice, very nerdy, very sweet. We did have sex like twice. The best thing I could say about it is it was boring. It just there was nothing there. There was just like, I would rather do something else. That's, I was not sexually attracted to him. But I didn't understand really what sexual attraction was until I basically found a woman or came across a woman that I became attracted to. And then it was like night and fucking day. I was like, oh, this is
Mhm.
sexual attraction, right?
Yeah.
And I think it gets, I don't know, I think it gets really confusing for some women, because we are not, first of all, we're not given the kind of total body autonomy and respect that men are given. Like men can make choices, boys can make choices, and that's respected, I think, more than women and girls. Girls are basically tracked. This is your track. This is what's, and also we get so much messaging that it's so important that men find us attractive and that men approve of us.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that leads us down into doing what we're not comfortable with as well. And also me too. I wanted to try to play straight. I was getting pressure from my peers and my friends. Why are you still a virgin? Why aren't you dating guys? You
Yeah.
know?
I mean, that honestly, I think explains the most of it for me. Like I said, I wasn't totally torn up about like having sex with a man. Like I didn't have that type of repulsion at that point in my life. But there's something to be said about feeling fat and hairy and unsexy, having a boyfriend at the end of high school. I was like, man, I'm not a virgin anymore. Like, that's validation in some way that like, even though I didn't really feel sexy, somebody thought I was sexy. And,
Mhm.
I do think that I was at, like I said, hormonal teenager. I think that I was more attracted to sex. I was happier to like, I was more excited about sex separate from him as an individual. I didn't like crave him or masculinity or yeah, him individually. I was just like, I could have sex.
I could get off, basically. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
and some women are that way. Like, my wife says that friction is friction, and sometimes that was her
And I
explanation.
think I think that, realizing, that I was, thinking that I was bi halfway through, I did kind of have that like, well, friction is friction idea.
That's her explanation of her couple years of fooling around, full of fucking guys for a while. Never had
Mhm.
a boyfriend or anything, but and and she also too could orgasm. I never could. I was like, no, this isn't working at all. But she could, and she was like, I was not attracted to them at all. She's like, I used them. She's like, I absolutely used them. They were just a dildo. I was
Yeah.
like, damn.
Listen, my fiance had a very, very similar experience too. Like a little more solid in her lesbianism, knowing that she wasn't actually attracted to them and that was a dildo to her. But
Mhm.
um, looking back, I mine was a little bit messier, thinking that I can
Mhm.
maintain a relationship. But yeah, there was no solid relationship to be had. I remember him talking to me, being like, "You make me such a better person. Like, what am I to you?" I was like, "Ooh, I don't know. I can have sex whenever I want, but what else do you do for me? Do you make me a better person? No."
Yeah.
Um,
It's complicated, and there's discourse that happens a lot online, and I think it happens online because it's easier to have these ideas that don't really work out in the real world. Because if you talk to older lesbians are going to totally get this conversation and
yeah.
not consider either of us not lesbians. However, there are some younger ones out there that will go, "Oh, you had sex with a man, that you cannot be a lesbian."
I know,
Or,
and I
"Oh, you had sex with a man and you didn't throw up in your mouth and pass out? Well, then you can't be lesbian."
literally, and I
I
don't
don't know if you've
question
run
anything
across
about
that.
myself. I don't question anything about myself now, but like those conversations were a little tough to see, and having like I wasn't able to draw a very clear through line, through all of these experiences. So it looks a little messy, but like, oh well.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, okay, so I'm glad we discussed that because it can be messy. Like when I was coming out, when I was in the gay lesbian community and late 90s, early 2000s, that was no one said shit if you had been with the opposite sex, because most of us had. Like it wasn't a
Yeah.
big deal. There were some lesbians who hadn't. There were some gay men who hadn't. There's a lot of gay men and lesbians who had been with the opposite sex.
Yeah.
There was a gay man who'd been married for like 20 years and had kids.
Yeah.
No one was like, "Get the fuck out of here, Bill. You're really
That was
straight."
that was such a common experience. I think that I had a harder time applying that same situation to myself, just knowing that like the times were different when I was younger. Like I didn't have, it wasn't as much pressure to be that closeted, at least where I grew up. I mean, I grew up in, rural middle of nowhere, not exactly middle of nowhere, but not New York City, where I live now. Ayo.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
but I knew that times were different, and the pressure to be that closeted didn't really exist as much anymore.
Yeah.
But that was my own personal hang up. People are still just as closeted to this day. That's a
So
totally
so
fair.
what was the spark moment that made you go, "Oh, I'm a lesbian. I'm not." Did you have a spark moment? Because I mean, I think I did, but
Yeah. It was a slow burn, honestly. Like it was simultaneously kind of all at once realizing that I was not attracted to men and allowing room to be attracted to women. Because like I said, I had all of these like negative feelings about other women that had to be undone in order for me to like recognize that there was an attraction there. I got rid of men from my life. I was like, whatever I'm attracted to, it's not that. So I was able to remove that from the equation. And the longer that I spent in college around other women and away from having a boyfriend, I was like, okay, this validation that I'm getting from like attention from other women, I like that much better, much better. Um, so that grew. And even though I identified as bi for a lot of that, I said that, but I knew that I was never going to date a man again.
by the way, that's such a normal track. I used to say this back in my day. Every single motherfucker who came through the youth group that I was in, or that for young adults, all identified as bi when they showed up, and we'd giggle because we're like, give them a couple of months, they're not going to be bi anymore. And for the most
Yeah,
part, all of it, and the men too. The men would come and say they were bi as well,
I'm sure, honey,
and then
sure.
pretty soon, you're like, yeah, no.
No, and yeah, I knew that there were like different types of bisexuals out there. I knew that there were people that were very genuinely attracted to, either sex, didn't really mark much of a difference in who they were attracted to. They were with this person and that person. Maybe they were poly at the same time. I don't know, but I knew that I knew it was never going to be a man again. I think I kept the bi label because I hadn't unraveled that there was no attraction to men just yet. I did a lot of journaling at the time, and I was like trying so hard to like identify what type of attraction I had to men, and was like, girl, you were thinking way too hard about how, in what hypothetical sense you could ever be attracted to a man. How about you don't worry about that?
You're kind of trying to convince yourself that you can do it, right? That's the other part of it. Like I told myself, well, I can do it.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't like, I'm not like completely repulsed. I'm not
exactly.
attracted. The sex is boring, but I can do it. And I don't
And
like
you're right. It
the
just, it just,
first the first time I kissed a woman, it was like, I can never go back. This is amazing. I would rather hold a woman's that I'm attracted to. I'd rather hold a woman's hand I'm attracted to than have sex with a man.
absolutely,
Like
absolutely.
ever. So
Yeah. So, I got on the dating apps at the time, which, Tinder was very usable at the time. It's since delved into, kind of madness. I always say that gay Tinder was very different from straight Tinder. When I say that
yeah.
I met my fiance on Tinder, people are like, "What? On Tinder?" I'm like, "Gay
Oh.
Tinder is different. It's not the same." Um, but yeah, I started dating girls, and it really was like I was interested. I was excited to go on another date, even if it didn't work out. I was like, "There's like I'm interested in them here,
Mhm.
right?"
Mhm.
Um, and it really wasn't until I stopped dating and or actually got involved with my fiance that I was like, "Okay, this is it. This is great. Never doing a man again. I'm a lesbian." Yeah. Between that boyfriend and my fiance, there was a trans man, which was a very interesting little jump here. um,
So you
Probably also why. Go ahead.
So you were exposed to it. How did you not get caught in it? Like, what do you think that
I thought I was something different again. Like I really thought that it was somebody else's problem. I didn't see it as my own issue. Um
so I guess you just didn't have issues around your sex and your perceived well, you didn't have issues around being a woman or your sex to the point where you felt like you needed to change.
yeah, I had done a lot of thinking at that time of like by the time I was in college, I had stopped shaving my legs. I had a really good influence of a friend in college that helped me kind of undo that thinking of women aren't funny, men are women are lesser, all of like it. I keep saying that like women aren't funny because that was like the one line that I said just very confidently. I was like, isn't it weird how like women aren't as funny as men? And she was like, no, that's not right. I was like,
What?
oh.
I mean, if I don't think it's true either.
No, oh, absolutely
I
not,
think both
absolutely not.
can honestly, in my opinion, I used to love comedy when it was still funny. Before it got
I'm
super
trying so hard, I'm trying
yeah.
so hard.
But I could find both men and women hilarious. Well, actually, most of my favorite comedians are women, though. Like one of my favorite is Marie Bamford. She's just fucking hilarious, and she's weird as fuck, and I love that shit. And she struggles with mental health, and she talks about it. And I don't know, there's just a lot about her that I really dig.
I know when people ask, like I try to watch a lot of comedy, and when my coworker asked me for like recommendations, I was like, you have to understand that my hierarchy here is very clear. It is gay women, straight women, gay men, straight men. Like first recommendations, you're only getting lesbians.
Yeah, I had the
um,
disappointing experience of thinking I was going to watch a lesbian comedian, only for her to start her bit by talking about how much she actually does like dick.
oh my
I'm
god.
like, ew, like in like really vulgar, and I'm
Yeah, I had
like,
I
what the
watched
fuck
a
are you talking
special
about?
I watched a special recently that was like exactly that. People were praising it up and down, and she just talked about sucking dick the whole time. I was like,
Wonder if it's the same woman. She says she's married to a woman, but
I
she
don't I
also.
don't think I don't think the special that I watched was somebody who called herself a lesbian or has a wife or anything. I think she was
I'm
genuinely
like, there's
straight.
nothing wrong with having a history with men.
Right, right, right.
However, the lying people is if you say you're a lesbian, but then say you still love dick. No, bitch, you can't have that. That's lying right there. You need to say you're bi.
Right? Like get it
Nothing wrong with having a history, but
together.
you cannot continue and then have that label because that is just rude, right? That's not respecting other people's boundaries. Anyways,
Literally.
so you escaped the trans thing. You just do you think you were
Yeah.
just confident enough in yourself? It sounds like it to me. It sounds like you had a good
Well,
sense of self.
that's really what had been there the whole time, I think. When I was what I was getting to about like stopping shaving my legs, that was like the first step into like, okay, this idea that like it grows naturally. How
Yeah.
can whatever my body does on its own be considered gross or unnatural?
Did you
Like,
have feminist input? Did you read feminist stuff? Was your friend a feminist? Like, did you have some
yes.
kind of okay.
So that friend in particular really helped me engage with those ideas.
Okay.
And I'm really grateful for that because who knows where I would have gone, She was the pioneer in my friend group of like not shaving, recognizing any inherent biases towards women on the basis of sexism. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was really, really helpful for me. Um, and that yeah, so I stopped shaving my legs. It was really scary at first thinking that everybody was staring at you, but then you realize you don't stare at anybody else either. Like everybody's normal, or like if they do stare, so what? Like
Yeah.
this is literally what my body does.
Yeah.
I it gets messy when I'm thinking about like I'm thinking about me being like naturally growing this hair, on my legs and all of this, separate from like the choice to take testosterone, grow this hair, having it be a choice to look a particular way and then getting the stares. You might be more subconscious about the choice of that. But I I knew that what I looked like and removing any extra steps to feminize, just existing in my natural body, like people couldn't say shit to me.
Mhm.
I am doing nothing extra.
Yeah.
I kind of had that male centeredness of like everything that I have done in that respect has been like, well, nobody bothers men when they do it. Nobody bothers men about their armpit hair or their leg hair or their facial hair. Like men and their facial hair, like that has always been my reference point. I don't see women with facial hair. I see some peach fuzz or whatever, but you know, at the rate that my hair grows, men can choose to shave it or not shave it. And if you see the stubble, that happens. It's
Uh-huh.
okay. Like for me to pretend that it wasn't there at all was just not possible for
Well,
me.
it's exhausting to always be so concerned about it too. Like that's
Exactly.
the thing
That's where I lost it at a certain point. I got okay with like letting my leg hair grow. My mom was always, I can tell that like a lot of this trajectory was like, my mom was never comfortable with it. She wasn't, it was always passive aggressive comments. You know, I
mothers.
Oh, mothers. Yes, exactly. Everybody has a unique a unique trauma there. I cut my hair short for the first time in high school, at the very end of high school. And this was always so funny to me. I remember saying to my mom, again in my sexist era, I was like, "Mom, is it possible to get a short haircut without looking like a lesbian?" And she said, "No."
It is though. You I see lots of straight women with short hair.
I know. I was obsessed with
Hell,
Emma Watson at the
there's
time.
been straight women who shave their heads.
Exactly, exactly. So, like, I knew she was wrong, and so, at that time when I still thought I was straight, I was like, "Well, I see enough women out there with short hair, like, I'll do it." And I'm like, "Mom, what are you talking about? Like, Michelle across the street is a mother and she has short hair. What are you talking about?" So I cut my hair short. Fine. Um, I continued to go shorter and shorter. I started with your old lady pixie cut,
Oh God.
and
Oh no. Don't bring back that trauma,
I'm
please.
so sorry.
That was my first short haircut, and I didn't want that. That was my mom's mandate because she didn't want me to cut my hair. I had
Right.
hair down to my ass,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then got that cut, and then it was horrible. And then I let it grow out again down to my shoulders, and then it started to creep up, cut, 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 cut. And then
Right.
finally I cut it short, and then one day I shaved it off, and I was like, yes, I like a shaved head.
Exactly.
First time I shaved my head, I was like 21.
Yeah.
I've
I
been
was
pretty much shaving my head most of the time throughout my life. It's yeah.
yeah, I started with that ridiculous pixie cut with, like, long pieces in the front.
Yeah.
So sorry.
I
Um,
had the middle-aged mom cut for
oh,
like
yeah.
in 1999. The middle-aged
Yes.
mom.
Started there, quickly went shorter and shorter and shorter. I ended up at some crew cuts, like
Yeah.
I knew the numbers that I wanted on the top and the side. Super cuts would always be like, "Are you sure you wanna go that short?" I'm like, "Girl,
Oh, did you get that too?
I've been big shaven bald. I know what numbers I'm talking about here." So that being said, I did literally take a big razor to my head once, completely bald. I was like, "This is so cool. I can feel the air on my scalp.
I
This
did
is."
that once too. I did that once too. Only once though, because I hated the skin felt weird and it like felt like it stuck to things, and I was just like, no, I gotta have some hair there.
Right. I admittedly, I did it for, my friends and I would go to anime conventions, and I did it for a cosplay once.
Oh, okay.
Um, and it was a lot of fun, and I didn't think anything of it. My hair had been this short before. I figured I would just shave it, and I came home from that weekend, and my both of my parents, who previously had been like, "Oh, whatever," with the short hair, were like, "What did you do?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" I was dumbfounded. I was like, "Guys, my hair has been this short
You would
before."
be surprised how much. people flip out on like a millimeter difference, man. I tell you what.
my mind was blown. I was like, you guys have been so cool about this. It's gonna reach this point again next week. Like, what are you talking about? My dad was like, you're lucky you have the face for it. My mom was like, you look like a cancer patient. I'm like, can you guys stop?
You're
Like,
like,
this
give
is,
it a week, it'll grow back. Shit.
and my mom continued with the passive aggressive comments. I would go to the beach and she's like, make sure you put sunscreen on your scalp. I'm like, can we stop this? Can we grow up? So it has always been, hair has always been a weird thing. I didn't start actually growing out my facial hair. So all through this time, from like middle school all the way to, I just looked back through my photos to see when I had actually like started to try to let it go. 2018. So I was about 23, 24, was when I was like, how long can this get? I think I'm going to stop. And I recognized even at the time, I was like, I had let my leg hair grow. I knew that it was like a natural, normal thing. I knew that my hang up was the facial hair because it was so obvious. It's so much heavier, so much more weight socially to that. I would figure I would try it. And as soon as it got to the point where like, you had some stubble, a day went by that you clearly did nothing about that stubble. My mom was like, your dad's really uncomfortable, like with what you've got going on. And I was like, what are you talking about? What? And I went back to shaving it until I moved out, like the next year. And
Tell me about the
yeah,
first experience of growing it out.
what's that?
So tell me about the first time that you actually let it grow out. Like how was the responses? What did you?
I told you I'm very fortunate that, I moved out to New York, and really, as far as like my coworkers at my job, my girlfriend at the time, like she was all for it. I really have to credit my fiance for the room that she gave me
Was
to
that her that you're talking about?
what's that?
The girlfriend at the time, is that her or a
Yes,
different?
yes, yes, yes.
Okay, yeah, just making sure.
Girlfriend, now fiance. I
Okay,
really owe it to her for giving me the room to explore what was naturally masculine about me without being weird about it. She,
you categorize it as masculine.
what's that?
You categorize it as masculine.
Oh, I know. This is something that I have a very tough time really qualifying here. I recognize that like feminine and masculine are like approximate terms for me to use. This is, like we said, a very female pattern of this. It's natural to my female body.
Yeah,
My closest approximation is to call it masculine based on how people perceive it.
exactly. And because that is the generally understood thing in the culture we live in, right? So you're
Exactly.
using the words that are just commonly used, and we can go into a whole philosophy thing about it, but we won't.
I know. Like I said, I can't keep it ideologically straight about that. I don't know what else to call
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I mean, you're just using the language you have. So,
Yeah,
so, uh, so she was. Did you talk to her about it first? You'd be like, "Hey, I think I want to let my facial hair grow out."
definitely. When I first started to do it a little bit before I had actually moved out, I was still dating her at the time, and she was like, "Oh, cool! Like, do it, do it." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." Like, no pushback. No, like, oh, like you don't. She she had always been a little turfy,
Oh, okay, very cool.
which was uncomfortable for me at the time. I still had all of my friends who were very much involved in this queer community.
Are you guys the same age?
Yes. Well, no. So I'm 29. She is 27.
Oh, okay, she's younger. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah, so she's a little younger than me.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so she was already there. She gave me the room to do all of this, and she knew that as I grew out my facial hair, as I like dress a little bit more,
Is she a
like
lesbian?
she's lesbian through and through. uh,
Is she
she
feminine?
never. Yes, I would describe us as Butch femme.
Okay.
Um, yeah, she never made it a trans thing. She never said, maybe you want to explore something. Maybe this means something else. No, she was like, you are so cool. This is so cool about you. And it just solidified this like butch femme dynamic that we kind of like fell into.
Mhm.
Um, all of this to say, facial hair itself, you know, she gave me the grace to grow that out. She always thought it was very cool. She liked it. She didn't think it made me less of a woman or less of a lesbian or that it meant I was a man, any of that. Um, I lived in New York. I didn't get any weird pushback from it from coworkers. Some confusion on, you know, I work in retail, so I see a lot of customers every day. You know, some confusion on gendering and asking pronouns and stuff. So that's my experience there. Um, but nobody, it never affected my ability to find a job. It didn't affect my, you know, my ability to be taken seriously in my role. So I'm very fortunate that as long as I stood my ground on like, this is who I am, this is what I am, like it did not have huge negative
Did
consequences.
you get? I'm curious. So you go in for a job interview. You have facial hair. Do they call you sir? Do they think you're a dude at first, or do they see the name? Are they confused? Like what happens there?
Well, fortunately, I haven't been for a job interview since growing out my hair. I got
Okay, so you
my
were at your job already, and
I was at my job
did you
already.
tell anybody ahead of time? Okay, guys, just let you know, I'm maybe growing my facial hair out.
Uh, honestly, no. I think
Just
I
kidding.
just showed up one day. It got longer and longer and longer, and we live in a world now where you know people hold their thoughts. I really think that people have the grace to not fucking say anything at this point,
Yeah.
and
Did
that
they?
has gotten
Did
me
anybody
through.
think you? Anybody think you were transing?
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
my coworkers had the grace to, you know, I would keep saying, "Oh, like she is fine. She, nothing's different." I didn't like have any serious talk with anybody. I
Mhm.
just continued going to work like normal. Coworkers were fine. It's always customers.
Yeah.
I, which obviously to this day I still get. My favorite one is I work at a glasses store. So I'm like mid transaction selling a pair of glasses to somebody wearing my glasses. And I'm like, oh, it's going to be this much, yada, yada. And she's like, are you transitioning? I was abrupt. Um, and me just not thinking about gender at all, not on my plate. I was like, my glasses, oh, yes, they're transitions. They turn dark in the sun, they're light and dark. And she's like, and she doubles down and is like, no, 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 your gender. Are you transitioning? I was like, no. And ever since then, I mean, always, I have a hard time reassigning, you know, people's expectations here to say, like, my instinct is to jump into like my medical history and be like, oh, well, no, I have a hormone imbalance and
I
I
know.
grow facial hair and I look, and I'm like, I don't owe you people an explanation for this. I just say, no, I'm a woman. Anyway, your total is going to be,
Good, good. I was gonna say that's what my answer would be. No, I'm a woman, and just
yeah.
continue on. Right.
Yeah,
Very cool.
that's had to be my answer. It's weird to assert. I wish that people would jump, you know, would just make their conclusions. And I really am not bothered when I have a quick interaction. I walk up to the counter at Chipotle and they say, "What can I get you, sir?" I say, "I'll get a burrito, thank you." Um,
Same.
I don't, if it doesn't, if right, if it doesn't affect me going through the world, I'm not going to correct anything. It's fine. I actually am like,
Especially with
man, I look
quick customer service stuff. Like what? I'm not gonna really correct anybody unless it's somebody I'm gonna have ongoing interactions with.
exactly. And
They need to understand what the fuck, don't call me a dude. I'm not a dude. But buying something at the store, who gives a shit? I don't care.
I'm getting through it. Like I don't need to educate people on what's going on.
No. I also don't need to scream at them. It's
Exactly, because it doesn't matter. I'm not. I've said to customers before who have like gotten extremely apologetic, like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Like I thought I didn't know," and I'm like,
You're
"It's
like,
fine.
okay, let's just move on.
It's okay." And I tell them, I'm like, I'm not making it very easy right now. It's kind of tricky, right? Like I get
That's the
it.
other thing. I mean, you gotta. you understand that, you know, butches aren't seen very often in the world anymore.
Yeah.
And even when we were, uh, people just, I mean, most women are very feminine looking. Like they do all the feminine beauty stuff. So
Yeah.
people aren't used to seeing women in a natural state.
It's 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 the same but different, you know. I think that before trans was a larger conversation, I think that people knew what butch was. Was it respected? No. But I think there was a framework for it. And at the same time, gender roles were so strict that as soon as from behind you saw somebody with short hair, you were like, man, like the threshold for what a woman was very, very strict, even if, you know,
I mean, I
even
still
if
think it is though, obviously, because the trans shit just is entrenched. So it's got to be
I,
entrenched for a reason.
yes, it
You know,
is. I think maybe my perspective living in a city is that there's a very wide range of presentation. As soon as you have anything even remotely androgynous, people go, "Oh, they? What's your pronouns?"
yeah. You see,
So,
you're
like,
dealing with that stuff. I
yes,
don't live in a super progressive area, so I just get the normal sir or
I
ma'am.
would
Just depends.
honestly, I would love that. I want somebody to make an assumption with their whole chest, and I will roll with it.
Mhm.
I am most irritated by what's your pronouns. Um, in my more confident fantasies, I say, "Oh, so you can't tell if I'm a man or a woman?" Like just bluntly saying that to them. I can't bring myself to do it.
I actually only have been asked my pronouns, well, twice. One was a job interview, and I was like, "Ooh, this isn't going well." But the other time surprised the hell out of me because it was at Chipotle. I literally was just in there to buy something at Chipotle, and I'm pretty sure he was a young gay man, and he called me sir at first, and then I started to talk, and he went, um, uh, "What pronouns do you use?" And I'm like, "Okay." So the reason he asked that is because he knew I was a woman,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
exactly.
And so then I just looked at him and was like, "I'm a woman." Anyways, I went blah 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 blah, and just like,
It's like, how is this any more validating than what we were just doing?
no.
Like,
I mean, I remember back in the day when I was in my early 20s and had come out and started to embrace myself as butch and had a shaved head and wore my tanks and my jeans and did the whole thing that I was comfortable with. I worked in customer service and I on several occasions got called it.
oof.
They knew I was a woman. I had huge breasts that I did not hide. They did it because of,
That's what a masculine woman is. It.
yeah. So like that's why the whole non-binary thing and even people who use it pronouns just hit me like, oh, you know.
That exactly. Like we fought for humanity here as women.
I
Like,
I had to fucking talk to so many people like in your situation, you're trying to sell them shit, you're in the middle of a conversation and suddenly they go, "Are you a man or woman?" or their little kid goes, "Are you a man or a woman?" And
oh,
you
little
have to
kids are tough.
the kids I'm okay with because like they just, they're trying to figure shit out. They're being honest.
I
It's fine.
know.
One time a kid, we were at the counter, I was ringing this woman up, and the kid's sitting there staring at me, and I'm like, here it comes. It's
You
coming.
know it a mile away. You're
Coming.
like, oh, this little snot-nosed kid, he doesn't
And
know
this
what's
little girl
happening.
goes, "Are you a man or a woman?" And her mom just goes, "Whack!" Like, shut up. And I was like, oh god, no, it's okay. It's okay. I said, "I'm a woman," and then just kept going. And the kid's like, okay. Like,
That's it. That so sometimes they get hung up though. So first of all, I had a very pleasant experience literally 2 days ago where some little kid walks up and the mom was like, "Oh, say thank you." And I see this kid's gears turning. I'm like, "Here it comes." He goes, "Is that a man or a woman?" And the mother was like, "That's a woman." I was like, "Ah, I
you're
didn't have
like,
to do anything
wait, I
here."
have some stickers for you.
I'm I'm on the verge of like praising her to high heaven. Like, I don't need to do that, but I'm like, wow, the confidence in 2024 in New York to say like that's a woman. I was like, wow.
Well, yeah, because for so many reasons, right? More than
Mhm.
likely, the odds are you're going to be a trans dude, like a
I
trans
know.
or a trans identified woman, right? That's the
Yeah.
odds, I think.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
okay, so what was your peak trans moment? Let's talk about
Reeling
that.
it in. Oh, um, so I was given the room, dating my fiance, that, this was okay thought to have, right? These are all ideas that I was kind of afraid to voice or afraid to think about too much further. Um, but a couple key things that I saw online, that really let it all unravel, right? First is just the general trying to keep up with it all. It keeps making less and less sense. Like the words that I thought were right were now wrong, and there's new words, and it doesn't line up with my experience. Fine, there's that. But truly, what sent me over the edge was seeing butch trans women. Like so men who identified as women, who identified as butch. And at that point, I was identifying as butch myself. Like, really finally came to terms with letting my facial hair grow, accepting the masculine qualities of myself that occur naturally, and like I am just a woman existing in the world. Like, butch was so beautiful to me.
Mhm.
There's a framework for this in lesbian identity, in the world, in presentation. Like, I'm so happy to have like made peace with what I have. And it was just incredibly offensive to me to be born a man, have those inherent, sexed qualities of yourself, and like say that's a woman. It no amount of like overcoming the very female experience of looking like that. It was is so key to butchness for me. Butch is female.
Yes.
Like, that's a female experience. You can be as masculine as any man walking down the street, and that makes you a man. Like, I'm sorry. Well, I'm not sorry. It
Where did you come across this?
This was, again, only online spaces, really. I had never experienced this in person. It went along with it was one particular user on Twitter that I would see a lot of because I was in like queer circles, and people are always like, oh, speak to trans women, refer to trans women on everything because they're the ultimate wisdom holders in the community, and we have to run everything by them. The idea of like, what is the acronym? TME, trans misogyny exempt. So not a trans woman, so I can't speak on anything. That's a big recent one that I saw for a while.
Women, you can't speak on anything. Listen to the men.
Exactly.
That
Like,
doesn't
when you
sound familiar at all.
you break it down to the bare bones, I'm like, I see what is going on here,
Yeah.
and I can't do that. I
Yeah.
just can't.
That was I saw the whole which trans woman thing too. And I mean, I was already peaked, but that just like that like threw me to another level. And I was just like, it was like a fucking slap in the face
It
because
was.
I'm like, just how you talked about the struggle to embrace yourself as you're comfortable and as you are, and to have to fight a whole fucking society, including your parents and maybe friends and family, to just exist as a natural woman is like, that's what makes butch. Like, that's what brings that to the table. And a dude just walks in being a dude and goes, I'm a lesbian. It's like, get the fuck out of here. Like, what are you talking about?
I can hear middle school boys, from my time in middle school, like, oh, I like girls, I must be a lesbian.
Yeah, it's that
Like,
old joke, right?
yeah,
It's
old
a joke
joke.
for years. I've
Yeah.
heard fucking old stupid white dudes say it too, even more recently, and I'm like,
I guess that makes me a lesbian too.
God.
I can't. I just can't.
Do you remember Mad TV?
Yes.
You remember the skit they did about that?
No, not that in particular. No.
I think it was in '99 they might have done it. maybe
Oh,
2000. There was a whole skit where this group of lesbians meet at a lesbian coffee house, and the one of the lesbians brings her new girlfriend, and it's just a dude. It's just a dude, and she doesn't recognize it. She thinks it's a woman, and her lesbian friends are like, no, and it was a joke, right? And now it's like
right.
reality.
Everybody understood what was funny about it, right? You
Yeah.
know?
If I can find, I'm going to find that clip if it still exists on YouTube. I'm going to link it in this video because
Yeah.
um, I'm also
Oh
going
man.
to link the shit I saw. I saw the Butch trans women on Butch is not a dirty word.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, oh, here we're supposed to be, telling butchers it's not a dirty word. We're supposed to be encouraging butchers to be proud of themselves and everything. And then you bring a whole ass fucking dude in here.
I
Like, what the
and
fuck? Oh,
like
and
I said,
one of the dudes was wearing a fucking bra that and a black see-through shirt. I'm like, first of all, a butch would never wear that.
know your history.
Like, what the fuck are you like? No self-respecting butch would ever wear that in public, at least. Now, Miss, she might wear it for her woman if they had something going on. I'm not saying
Sure.
she wouldn't, but that is not a public persona we are putting on.
Right. Oh God. And like I said, I had sympathy and still do for gender nonconformity. Like I wouldn't call it like being born another sex, like the wrong sex or any of that. But like I have sympathy for feeling like you don't your presentation bars you from being seen as you want to be seen in the world. Like I get that, but a
No,
masculine man does not a lesbian make. I'm sorry.
no, but no man does a lesbian make.
Thank you.
But the other thing too is it's like, yes, it's hard to present. If you are one sex, it's hard to present in a fashion that is generally assigned to the other sex. That's the problem. Okay. What should be happening is you should be embracing yourself as a man or as a woman and wear whatever you want. You know,
And
that's I think the most truest, honest, most rebellious thing you could do. Medicalizing your body to fit into the box is not.
right,
Not calling yourself the opposite is not.
that mindset is something that I am very fortunate to have found early enough in my exploring lesbianism and masculinity that I knew the whole time that like I am a woman. Anything that my body does naturally is not wrong. And in me letting my facial hair grow and presenting the way that I present, my goal here, my mission statement, if you will, is to expand to expand femaleness.
Yes.
Like I need people to know that women look like this
Mhm.
even with no intervention, like this is a natural variance of femaleness.
Mhm.
You know, any of these interests, physical presentation, ways of dressing, ways of behaving, none of these things contradict your sex.
Yeah. Brilliant.
I was actually listening to the podcast Stone Butch Disco pretty recently, and re-listening to your episode, which I really enjoyed, because and what I enjoy about that whole podcast in general is the sexual aspect of different behaviors that are now in the trans world, assigned like, oh, if you enjoy this, it means something else about you. Just the type of sex that you have, and any behaviors that you engage in, like I said, do not contradict your sex.
Oh yeah,
Um,
like the idea that if you are a lesbian who likes
if you
to,
enjoy using a strap
yeah,
on, if you
yeah,
are more dominant versus less submissive, like all
yeah,
of these things are tied to a very very strict idea of like gendered behavior where like women are submissive, women can only have sex a particular way, can only be pleasured a particular way. Like it's so obviously regressive.
Yeah, and misogynistic and male-centered. It's
Yes.
male-centered because if you don't center male in it, then or men in it, or men's sexuality in it, then what are you going off of?
Yeah.
Like anything two women do together is female sexuality.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter.
It's that simple.
Yeah, I have an issue with I don't really listen to some Best on Butch Disco anymore, just because she wavers too much for me.
So the interesting thing about that is if you dropped off listening to it, first of all, it's funny to go back and listen to it because especially from like part 1 to part 2 of when she had you on, there is like a 30-minute like qualifier of like
Yeah.
what we're talking about, right?
Mm.
But at the very end of last year, she just completely like she made an episode that was like, you know what, forget it, like she went off like the kind of turf rails, you know.
Mhm.
She was like, I need to be able to talk about what I need to talk about, and if people are going to call me a turf, they're going to call me a turf, and really kind of like caught up to speed, and then didn't really make any episodes up until like a couple of weeks ago, or maybe like last month she put out something that was like, hey guys, like here I am.
It's the auto straddler one, right?
Right.
Yeah. I feel like
But
she walked it back though in that one.
I think so. She's yeah.
And
You
you know, I'm not without understanding, but I'm also just old and tired, and I've been through this for too long. And I just like I cannot listen to waffling. Like I can't. Like you fucking grow a pair and step up. You know what I'm saying? Like just do it. And of course that might be my countryside talking too, but you know, I'm like, suck it up, fucking stand for what you know is right,
Mhm.
and fuck the rest. Why are you? And the other thing is, like, as so many of these people, and I think her included, so many don't understand that you cannot logic with these people. There is no logic here. Stop trying to do that. Just speak to your audience and know who your audience is. If your audience is the trans rights advocates or even the people on the middle who want to be nice, then you're going to lose every time because you have to be 100% in agreement with them.
Yeah.
Or they're going to just call you a turf and never listen to you. So your audience should be just the lesbians who are already there and the lesbians who maybe are kind of like almost there, and they hear you talk and they go, she gets it, you know? But ultimately, I don't really care. Like, I'm not here to win people over. I'm just here to like offer the other perspective.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm trying to do moving forward. You know, I'm here to speak about my experience around this culture. And that's really all I can speak on. You know, my perspective, how I make sense of it, and how it affects me. I, you
I
know,
wonder,
it's
I wonder if she'd come on my channel.
Hmm?
Well, because I'm not trying, like, I'm not trying to bash her here or anything. Okay.
No, I understand.
This is like my opinion, but I still value her. She's a lesbian. She's a butch lesbian. And I'm not going to diss her, you know? The other thing though, that like, I kind of took issue with this, I think in the interview too, is pushing back a little bit on that. Even she seems to have this idea that wearing the strap and having that kind of sex is something different or something
Mm-hmm.
that makes a butch. And I'm like, I don't like sex rules around lesbian sex, basically. That was a big thing that I ran across early on in the days that actually made it very difficult for me to embrace myself as a butch lesbian, was these rules that butch lesbian couldn't be into penetration, butch lesbians couldn't be quote unquote bottoms, we had to be tops,
Yeah.
and I was just like, well, that's kind of stupid. Like, why are we ruling what we do? I mean, like, if you're into it, fine. Like, I'm not telling you can't be into it, but like, don't set those rules out either.
Right. The structure, the gendered rules, like
Yeah.
we're losing the we're losing the thought here.
We're also losing just the fun in it.
Yeah.
Sex is supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
lesbian sex is supposed. I consider lesbian sex to be joyful. It should be joyful, right? I mean, I was just talking to a friend the other day about you know what porn shows, even the true lesbian porn, or like that kind of stuff versus what happens in the reality of lesbians relationships. And I'm like, how many times have you guys been having sex and like cracked up over something, you
Of
know
course.
or like, been talking about something while you're kind of having sex before you get serious about it. Like, you know it's not this super serious thing. And also
Not very cinematic sometimes, you know?
it's not cinematic. Sometimes it takes a while and you're like, keep doing it. Um, and also just the whole like, using the strap, or who is being the giver and who's receiving.
Mhm.
I talked to a an older femme woman, who basically said, I asked her off record, I said, the assumption is that the butch is like, the top, right? In your experience in all the relationships you've had, what actually plays out? And she's like, what
Boy.
actually plays out is it's all very pretty mutual. It's
Yeah.
not, it's not
And it
like,
has
yeah.
to be. I mean, you're two women here, and nobody has a dick. Like, we have some tools in our tool belt, but, like, at the end of the day, like, this is not it's you're on such a level playing field. Like, you can pretend all you want that there's, like, you can create a power dynamic as much as you
Mhm.
want. That's all fun and good. But inherently, you're starting out here, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I also,
I had a lot of trouble with that coming um from having sex with men to having sex with women exclusively, and just realizing what role I was going to play in that. Eventually realizing that, the roles aren't so strict and you can really do whatever you want. But this idea of like giving and receiving, like it was tough for me to grapple with as a lesbian. That I had a hard time. I had a hard time figuring out how to have sex that meant that we could both like come at the same time. Really,
mm,
it really felt like a taking turns situation, which is also fun in its own right. Um, but that was a hang up for me for a while. That like to find a way to like come at the same time
you felt like
with
you had to, or
it
you
was
just
something
wanted
that
to.
it was something that I wanted.
Okay.
It was something that I wanted, and I found many ways to do that. But it was a very different framework than, again, I felt like being straight had a very clear script. It was very easy. Um, tale as old as time, and to be fair, lesbianism is a tale as old as time as well. We've been figuring this shit out for years.
Yeah.
Um, but
Also,
yeah,
I don't know, this whole idea of coming at the same time is, I think, is another cinematic thing.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it doesn't usually happen with anybody, to be honest. I mean, usually one's for the other, but I mean,
yeah.
sometimes it does happen, but
It was partly something that I wanted. Part of it I had to let go as like an expectation of straight sex, which do men
it's
and women
just
come at
weird
the same
because
time either? No. Uh,
statistics show that lesbians orgasm way more than straight women do.
absolutely true. Absolutely true.
So there's that. Yeah, the whole butch thing around sex too is always is something I've found interesting. Just because I see, especially I see butches get hung up on that really bad, and I also see younger ones having trouble with it. Which, of course, they are even having more trouble with it because the whole gender things, the whole trans
Yeah.
thing's involved in it too. Telling them, oh, if you forceful, or a top or whatever, then you're more of a dude, and it's like, no,
Yeah.
no.
Uh, I think a lot of lesbian relationships suffer from a baby butch thinking that she has to be a top. If you're
Yeah.
not a top, just don't do it.
Yes.
Find
So,
somebody who can make it work for you.
well, thanks for talking to me about that. I haven't had anyone wanted to discuss that. Well, Yeah, and I think especially between butches, like we should talk about these kind of things because I mean
Yeah.
I've had a lot of hangups around sex, and
Yeah.
I have a friend who's been helpful too, even more recently, where she's like, even sometimes I get a little hung up about liking to receive, and she was
Yeah.
like, "Who doesn't? I love it," and I was like, "You are an inspiration to me. Thank you."
I mean, yeah, like you said, when the expectation is for a butch to be a top, to give, and to only, stone butch is such
Uh-uh.
a common idea. Like, yeah, we all get a little hung up about it. It comes with the territory, and it's not the rule. We learn through experience. Um, Even if some people fit that mold, but I had a lot of trouble coming to terms with it too. Like, I enjoy a lot of different aspects of sex. I really do enjoy, like, some amount of penetration. My fiance does not like to wear a strap,
Mhm.
but that is not the only way to penetrate. We've got plenty of tools there too. And honestly, what has really been a game changer for me personally in terms of like sex toys and everything is a strapless harness. So like basically a double-ended dildo. So
Yeah, I don't think I could make those work for me.
I know, it's a
Those don't
very
weird.
it's a very, like, hit or miss.
Yeah.
It's for those who it's for, and it's not for those who it's not, and, I have made very good use of it, and I really love it, and I really enjoy it because I can feel like I can wear a strap at the same time and actually feel something, and we both get something here.
Well, I mean, if you get it, you know what? Oh god, this is a whole nother rant for me.
Making it work.
No, back in the day, strap-ons used to be more designed. You could find strap-ons that were designed for women to use them to get pleasure from wearing the strap.
I know what we're doing
But
here.
what?
I said, I go on, go on.
But lately, everything's become very male centered, very porn
Mhm,
centered. So the
mhm.
straps are not designed anymore to sit at the position they need to sit at for the dildo to stimulate your clitoris,
Absolutely
which is
true.
how that works. Um, and so, like, to find something that actually works is just fucking ridiculous at this point because they
My
used to be made and designed by lesbians very often.
It was the only those are the only ones fucking wearing these
Yeah.
things. So my struggle in trying to shop around for stuff like this is that even a dildo that has pages and pages of reviews are 80% straight women being like, my husband loved this in his ass. This dildo
Yeah.
is perfectly designed for a male anus. I'm like, what's my girlfriend supposed to do with this? Like, what does this
You're like,
mean?
hell.
Ew. I don't even want something that's been reviewed by a straight woman.
That's
Oh,
the issue I've seen because you
the
can't
market has expanded too much.
too much. No, because you absolutely not every woman, but you can absolutely come with a strap, like
Yeah.
wearing it. Absolutely, if it's hitting right, and that's the key.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, the way they're designing shit now is just ridiculous. Like, I guess, like, what's your belief system now around all this?
I don't think that anybody is born in the wrong body. Um, if you have any sort of mental hang up on your body, it's change the mind, not change the body to match it. Um, I appreciate fucking around with gender and presentation, and even within a relationship, like, this kind of butch femme thing for me
Mhm.
feels a little gender play a little bit. Sometimes I lean into it, sometimes I don't.
Yeah,
Have fun. Don't take
fun.
it too
Fun
seriously.
is the key.
Fun. Remember who you are, what you are at the end of the day. Um, I have a hard time engaging with the queer community, even when I recognize that so many of us have a very similar experience, but I feel like I don't have access to it because of the words that I use, that I choose to describe it, or that I would describe it in a different way.
What about the lack of lesbian only spaces?
That is incredibly tough.
I mean, that's a big one
Even
for me. Oh, I hate that shit.
it's really tough. Like I said, even in New York, it's very queer centered. I can go to Henrietta Hudson and Cubbyhole, and these are, the known lesbian bars that have rebranded as queer bars, and anybody can be there, which is like, oh, great,
You
fine,
just
fun.
defeated the whole purpose.
Yeah,
Your
I
inclusivity excluded.
yeah. I don't have a space besides an online situation like this to kind of weed through the ideology. Like I said, if I feel like, yeah, I have trouble engaging with the queer community because I expect to be turned away based on how I think of myself and other people.
You can't be
As
honest, right?
Yeah, I feel like I can't be honest. And I'm very willing to have friends that, identify a particular way and try to use their pronouns. Like I'm civil. You can call yourself whatever you want. And I'm not gonna like exclude you from my life, but like I think of it differently.
Yeah. It's just,
It
it's a lack of mutual respect. And that's a real problem.
Yeah. I am trying to be more open and honest about it in my personal relationships. I haven't spoken to a handful of those friends that were mostly were like my queer surrounding,
Mhm.
growing up. Um, I feel like I can't be honest about where I'm at now in terms of how I think about it. Even talking to you right now, I'm like, man, if they saw me on this channel, like it would be quite a conversation, you know?
Well, they might. I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to. I mean,
And it will be, I when it gets around. But it's honest. I can't lie anymore.
I really, I miss lesbian spaces. I miss that being respected. I miss the word lesbian being respected, to understand that it did not include men and
Yeah.
that it did not include straight women, and that bisexual women could come and join under
Yeah.
certain circumstances, especially if they were in that relationship with a lesbian. But I have seen so much just boundary breaking that
Yeah.
is just really disturbing. Like, even I had a friend who went to a women's festival, and this particular women's festival was just a few years ago. And this women's festival is women born women, tries to keep it very, like this. Even in that situation, there was a workshop gathering for lesbians. It said that. Yet several bisexual women showed up and then proceeded to complain that they weren't included.
Girl.
And she's telling me this, and I'm like, well, whoever was running it should have told them to leave. I don't understand. Like, this is the other problem. Women are too nice. That's the
I
other.
was going to say women are very kind, very
Well, we need to
understanding.
stop. There's nothing wrong with there's nothing wrong with having boundaries. There's nothing wrong with saying no. No is a complete fucking sentence, word, whatever. Stop. You don't belong here. But I do miss the days when people knew they didn't belong in a group and kind of excused them fucking selves,
Yeah. Yeah.
I found myself in those situations. You go, maybe I went to a party, maybe I went to a group gathering, something was happening. I show up there and I go,
Oh.
I'm going to leave. Have a great
Yeah.
time. See you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I feel cheated that like by the time that I came to terms with being a lesbian and a butch lesbian, that like I am having a really hard time finding community to engage with it. I keep finding spaces that are like close. Oh, they're so close. I can kind of get something from this, but it's still not meeting me where I'm at.
Do you get lesbian connection?
I do.
Okay.
I love Lesbian Connection.
Well, There's going to have your information in there for some of those gatherings that you can get to. And you're in
Exactly.
New York, so you might have a little bit, maybe easier access to some of them. I'm not sure. A lot of them are like Midwest or South.
Yeah,
There's really nothing over here.
a lot of things still pop up around like the Michigan area,
Mhm.
obviously. My fiance and I are hoping to do something next year. We've been going to Cape Cod on some vacations, so
Mhm.
hoping to find something. There's a women's thing in Provincetown.
Yeah.
I don't know where the trans part of it is. Even then, I'm making my exceptions. I'm like, I'll, you know, I'll tolerate what I can. I
I would
would
say I would definitely recommend going to one of the women only or lesbian
I
only
want to.
groups.
We got to make it
Or
out there. I want to be
yeah.
able to walk around in the woods naked with my tits out, with my beard out, and have everybody understand what the hell is going on.
Well, not
I
everybody
know.
might, but it's going to be definitely a more actually inclusive space for you than if there was
I
everybody.
know. I'm very bitter at the the cultural tide that makes women more skeptical of me.
I
You
know.
know, I think there was a very brief moment where like I never used to be so worried about bathrooms.
Yeah.
I the
How is your
conversation
bathroom experience?
It's more anxious than it used to be,
Yeah.
honestly. I don't use the men's bathroom.
Mhm.
That's way scarier than any woman saying, "Hey,
Yeah.
again, this is." I know who my who my friends and who my enemies are here. It is not a woman being confused until I open my mouth. As you've always said, as soon as you hear my voice, as soon as you see my profile here, uh, there should be no confusion. I'm sorry that you have to jump to, to secure your space, but let me get on with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very bitter that everybody is kind of clenched about it right now because I
Yeah.
think there was such potential to like undo all this gender stuff until it went the other direction. We were so close, I think.
Yep. Yeah, they like to twist that around and say that the turfs are making it harder for the Butch women. I've heard that shit. And I've heard Butch women say that shit. And I'm like, you are full of it. You're full
Mm-mm.
of it, woman.
As long as it is rooted in in being sex based, we can work on the rest.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But the thing of allowing actual men into bathrooms because they feel like women or they wear dresses or whatever, no. Like that's caused more upheaval and problems for gender nonconforming actual women to go in the restrooms, right?
Passing is not the end all be all. If somebody is uncomfortable, there is some amount of work for everybody to put in. As long as we're all judging on the same basis, which is sex. I understand the clenching when they think that I'm a man and they go, ooh. Once we establish the truth, we should both be cool.
Yeah. And then I hear the argument, oh, well, how are you going to regulate that? You're going to ask to see everybody's genitals?
Never
No,
had to.
you don't have to. But again, an ID, if you weren't allowed to falsify your ID, would probably suffice.
Yeah. If
That's
we
the other
really
thing
had
with
to, if we
falsifying an
really had to
ID.
draw a line, right?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. If that's honestly, I give women a lot more leeway with this because like I get it, you know. Although where I don't give them much leeway is when they know I'm a woman, but they see me as a dyke and they don't want me there because I'm a lesbian. That's where you're going to get shit from me.
Yeah.
Which
Because
actually,
that's like, get with it. Get with it.
for me, that's actually happened more than the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, like 4 months after stopping tea, I was already having my period and stuff. Me and my wife were on a road trip and you need to use the restroom. And it's the first time I used the women's restroom again. And I was super scared. And it was at a fucking like service station. And
Yeah.
and she said, okay, I'll wait right out here and just go in, do your thing. And if there's a problem, I got your back. Okay. It was a small restroom. There were some women in there already. So I went in, did my thing, came out, was washing my hands. There's these two women. They spoke Spanish. and they were talking in Spanish and looking at me, and I knew they were talking about me, right? And so I come out and I oh no, they went out before me, and then I came out, and my wife looked really mad, and she was like glaring at them out there, right? And I'm like, oh, something transpired. My wife's Mexican; she speaks Spanish, so
Mm.
I go, I think they were talking about me, and I'm not sure. She's like, oh yeah, they were. They were calling you a fucking dyke. But I told them. I told them they better just keep. But I don't know. She told them some horrible stuff in Spanish. But anyways, it scared the shit out of them. But I was actually excited that they recognized me as a woman.
Yeah, right. Oh, what a sick win. What a sick win.
They hated me for being a lesbian in there.
So
But I was a
validating.
woman.
Oh no.
Yeah, sick
Oh,
win.
man.
Really.
That's yeah, I would take that at this point too.
Hey, I was only 4 months off, you know. I hadn't it took a good year or so for my like features and fat redistribution to look more female
Yeah.
because I was on for 4 years. So, you know, changes your body. So it takes a while to kind of come back around to where you're like, look, female.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was worried, you know. I mean, I shaved and everything, but that's, you know,
Literally.
yeah,
Sometimes, I mean, I try to run my experiments of like how often I get misgendered, growing my beard out versus shaving it. It really doesn't make a huge difference. I had longer hair down to my shoulders recently. It's all over the place.
yeah, it is all over the place. It really is. Do you know what I do notice though? I do get recognized as a woman more often when I'm with my wife because I think they recognize us as a lesbian couple.
Absolutely.
But if
Absolutely.
I'm by myself, it's a little more,
It's
hmm,
it's in question.
yeah. Isn't that weird?
No, I see that also.
Yeah. It's like it makes sense. They're like, oh,
Again, there's a framework for
yeah,
gender nonconformity and lesbianism. Like we're familiar that this kind of goes hand in hand.
yeah. So yeah, you should get to a lesbian only or women only event. Definitely awesome. Awesome to be
Tune
at.
into.
Yeah. All right. Any final words before we close this down? Thank you for coming on and talking about all this stuff. It was really great. We covered a lot of ground.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be able to talk about it for real.
Yeah. But any final thoughts? I'd like to give my guests final thoughts if they have anything they want to.
um, you're female no matter what, no matter what behaviors you engage in, no matter how you dress, no matter what body type you have, how your hair grows, nothing that you do or undo or add or take away, makes it anything else. That's my life motto now.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming on here talking about stuff
Of
and
course.
have a good rest of your day.
You too.